Welcome to the Literally First Class podcast, where I will teach you how to overcome anxiety and achieve somatic success. I'm your host, Keri Ford. I'm a somatic success and holistic life coach here to bring humor, insight, and wisdom to the modern day woman that wants to feel alive in her daily life. You ready? Come on, I saved you a seat in first class.
I thought you said we're not recording.
I lied.
Jeez. All right.
Okay. So finally you're here. And I want to talk about my favorite topic.
What's that?
Me. I'm just kidding.
Me.
Let's talk about the weather. What?
You are just trying to elicit responses from me. Like eye roll responses.
Is it working?
Oh my God.
That's like the fourth one.
Hurry up so I can go make a smoothie.
Well, the point, you can't look at the camera when you record.
Whatever. All right.
So, what kind of topics do you think would be important for people to hear about? Like, what's on our heart to share as people go into the new year?
I mean, it's something that's always on my heart, which is the focus on achievement and success apart from healing and transformation.
Okay. What do you mean by that? For those that are like, how's that separate?
It's a great question. Most people are overly focused on their behaviors and shifting their behaviors, developing a new routine, new habits, et cetera, but they're not doing the necessary inner work to support those new habits, those new behaviors. Gabor Mate, which we both love, he's a psychotherapist, for those of you who don't know, but he put it in this way, why the behavior, which is the wrong question. It's what's motivating the behavior. And so if all you do is seek to shift your external behaviors or develop new healthy habits, you're not ultimately focusing in on the foundation. Because the foundation is your beliefs. The foundation is your identity as a person. Yeah. And so if you don't fundamentally experience a shift at the level of belief, then your behaviors are likely not going to stick. They're not going to be sustainable.
You and I would say, probably border the description of experimental in terms of the ways in which that we try to rewire or experience or immerse ourselves in different things and modalities. We also have like our core things that we always go back to, right? Meditation. You and I will have like an impromptu breathwork sesh, but
I would call it open as opposed to experimental, but sure.
You know what I mean, though. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a lot of things that happened last year, both personally and professionally, which were arguably like kind of intertwined for us. But last year we were forced to reevaluate how we even wanted to run our business. Like what felt good, what patterns did we have in place that were not toxic, but just really not in alignment to how we envision living life. And but more than that, like what was actually sustainable from like an emotional regulation and like an emotionally stable, expansive place,
Well, when you have unexpected life events happen,
why don't you tell them like what that was?
Both of us did.
Yeah.
So for myself, I experienced an early onset seizure in late February of last year.
That was so scary.
As a result, I experienced a traumatic brain injury due to the fall from the seizure. And it took me several months to recover. And all of these mental resources that I was very, very used to having access to, or I was used to them being available to me, like motivation, determination, assertiveness, passion, were gone. All of these things that I've relied upon to create some pretty substantial success in my life, especially over the course of the past 7, 8 years as I've delved into my own personal development, become an entrepreneur, started multiple different businesses, were gone.
Yeah.
And I couldn't adequately self-source those mental resources in order to get things done.
Yeah, it was really just learning how to source from a totally different space, which was a big fat blank. Like, where do I source from if it's not from those things,
100%. And the answer is that on some level you can't. Because you can't artificially manufacture, well, let me back up. You can through medication, for example.
Like what kind of medication?
Which I had to do.
Yeah.
But, when you're depressed, when you're in chronic hypervigilance, which is just to say you're in a consistent stress response.
Yeah.
You can't self-source those mental resources on your own. You need other means by which to do so. Obviously, caffeine can be a thing that you turn to, but
sure.
Obviously...
Well, this is where people struggle too with like adrenal fatigue.
Right.
I remember when I was doing fitness competitions and I was up to, because I was taking pre-workout and all the things, oh my word. But one of the things that I did was I started ordering 4-shot, I think it was called what is it, a red eye? Where it's coffee and espresso?
I think a red eye is like a cup of coffee with a shot or two of espresso.
Oh, I was like up to 3 or 4. I mean, I'm 5
That's
feet
insane.
And like 100 pounds. And I literally wasn't feeling anything. No. And so that's when I knew I had adrenal fatigue.
Yeah. And so, coffee is one way to do it. But when you're depressed, obviously the effects of the caffeine are significantly less. So for me, after several months of trying to essentially amp my system up to the point of being able to get even very basic things done, like my morning routine, were massively difficult. Just getting out of bed on certain mornings was an accomplishment. And so eventually over time, I think it was probably like 3-4 months in, I think it was early June, that I had to, go on medication in order to self-source energy from a different place because I was incapable of doing so within my physical body and obviously mentally and emotionally.
Sure.
No amount of like reconnecting to my why was going to create the energy, the motivation that I needed, that I required in order to continue to run my business in the way that I had. Because of course, after the injury, I had employees, I had fixed expenses, and all of those things needed to be managed. And I was ultimately the one that was responsible for all of those things. But I didn't have, like I mentioned, the typical mental resources that I had relied upon to get my business to that place to begin with. And so eventually I had to go on medication in order to support me. All of that is to say, whenever you have unexpected life circumstances that are very much outside of your control happen to you, it absolutely shifts not only your priorities, but your values as well. Because all of a sudden, What
was like your biggest takeaway from that experience?
Probably that I unconsciously embraced busyness as a means to avoid my anxiety.
Wow. I think so many people can relate to that because I know I did that for years and I labeled it as like, but I'm being productive. I would rationalize it.
Oh,
it would make me feel important because I was needed somewhere,
Yeah. And so working out were the unconscious motivation beneath it was, and all of those things were an avoidance strategy.
Yeah.
Right. Which, like you mentioned, is very easy to justify because we rationalize it behind the guise of strong work ethic, being assertive and
it's
determined.
Celebrated too by external, like, oh my gosh, you're so disciplined.
Totally.
Wow, celebrating you.
Right.
And
yep. I'm driven by impact, right?
Right.
Which is, again, the conscious desire right? I do desire to have an impact in the lives of people. I do desire to make a difference. I desire to serve others and improve the lives of other people. That's the conscious desire, but the unconscious motivation beneath it, or for those of you who are familiar with Carl Jung, like the shadow motivation beneath the conscious desire was different, right? And that's what, Gabor Mate was ultimately getting to, especially when he talks about addiction, right? The wrong question is why the addiction? The right question is why the pain?
Ooh, that's good. Say it again.
The wrong question is why the addiction.
Yeah.
The right question is why the pain. The reason people are addicted, right? Addicted to anything, whether it's drugs, alcohol, pornography, which obviously I think on some level we can all agree have very damaging side effects, but it's what I refer to as these noble coping mechanisms, right? Which are just avoidance strategies that are easily justifiable, very easy to rationalize, like work, like working out, like caretaking, right? Because if I'm taking care of my partner or my kids or my family, that can easily be an avoidance strategy, because as long as I'm focused on other people and caring for the needs of others, who am I not focused on? Myself. Because the minute I focus on myself and my needs, then I'm forced to sit with the pain that I'm ultimately trying to avoid by virtue of constantly caring for other people. So it's these things that are very easy to rationalize that all of a sudden when I was forced to slow down, I was forced to confront my anxiety. And that's when I realized, oh, my working out, my habits are unconsciously motivated in an unconscious attempt to avoid anxiety.
Yeah. Well, and I describe it like a glass, right? That's your window of tolerance, which is like your optimal zone of arousal for your nervous system. You can imagine it like the container of the glass. And then there's the water inside, which is stress. But if that's filled up to the top, it starts to spill over. And then that's what people learn to mask, manage, cope, control, suppress. And then it shows up in a lot of the ways that you're talking about, which is where we want to avoid that pain. We don't know what to do with this, overwhelm in the system. And so we have a lot of, the avoidant tactics that make us feel like we're managing it, even though we're just temporarily avoiding it for a bit.
100%. And that's why I often tell my clients our greatest strength is often an adaptation or an overcompensation to avoid dealing with pain. Sure. I have historically been incredibly assertive, determined, motivated, passionate, like we talked about, driven. And you and I both serve entrepreneurs. So our clients are very, very similar in that they're the high achieving type, high performing type. But when you really start to dig beneath the behavior, you realize very, very quickly that all of these behaviors were unconsciously adopted in an attempt to avoid pain. Obviously, that looks different for everyone.
Yeah.
And there's nuances and uniquenesses there in terms of like the pain that we're actually talking about, right? But for me, specifically, it was in an attempt to avoid insecurity, because I grew up in a fundamentalist conservative Christian environment that significantly negatively impacted my self-esteem to where I never felt good enough. And so I needed to overcompensate as a result, which is what drove it's what drove me to adopt these mental resources of assertiveness, drive, motivation, determination, etc. That now well into adulthood, again, is very easily rationalized or justified, because it's hidden behind the guise of being, growth-minded or
right.
or a hard worker who has hard work ethic, success-driven, purpose-driven, fill in the blank. And so we find this, and I say we because I know you and I experience a lot of this with our clients, is we find that when we really dig beneath the behavior, right? Because we're not interested in answering the question, like, why the addiction? Like, why are you constantly working? Right? Why are you on the verge of burnout?
Right.
Why are you experiencing chronic stress?
Yeah.
Why are you anxious, right? Why can't you unplug?
Yeah.
Right. And most of them might say, well, I'm addicted to my phone. Well, again, that's just like the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at an iceberg, you're only seeing 10% of it. 90% of it is below the water. Well, that's a really beautiful metaphor for our conscious mind and our unconscious mind. Conscious mind is just what you see above the surface. The unconscious is everything that's below it that's ultimately driving your behaviors, your actions, and your decisions. So we're not interested in asking the question, right, why the behavior? We're interested in asking what's beneath the behavior.
So if you were to give me the number one way that you see, I'll call it fear of being with the pain or fear of potentially experiencing pain manifest with men, what do you see? Because I know my answer for the type of clients I serve for women.
Well, for everyone, it's arguably the same when you boil it down. It's because it's a survival strategy.
Sure.
So it's rooted in basic survival.
But if you were to give a specific example that they could say, oh shit, that's me right now, that they consciously see in their patterning.
Well, I think it's a couple things. Being overly focused on success, achievement, accomplishment, right? Accumulation
Of
resources, money, possessions, etc. I would say the pursuit of possession, power, prestige. I think those are those are the strong indicators. So people who are workaholics, right, who struggle to slow down, actually take time off, rest, unplug. They get anxious when they're not working, when they're on vacation, when
that's what I was pointing to.
When they don't have their phone.
I find that the biggest fear that my clients have is being still.
100%.
They're like, but what do I do?
100%.
And I'm like, you can relax, you can be on vacation, you can simply just be with yourself. And they're like, what do you mean be with myself?
Right.
But it's this fear of the potential experience of pain or being with those thoughts. So would you agree that the way through that and the way to expand somatic capacity is learning how to be with what is, even if it's pain?
Well, you have to ultimately do the thing that you're avoiding.
Sure.
Point blank, period. Because their nervous system is wired to avoid. Well, when you're being still.
And I want to pause there only to describe this to people that aren't sure what that means.
Sure.
Your nervous system, if it is stuck in a chronic on position, meaning it is in a sympathetic dominant response.
Sympathetic meaning fight or flight.
Correct. And so that fight or flight means you are constantly seeking the dysregulated experience in your system because that is what you experience as your normal. And I say this to the people that the clients I have and in the trainings that I host, but it's, that normalized stress that's chronic is not actually normal necessarily, even though you experience it as your normal. Cool. So if you are stuck in that on sympathetic dominant, response, you are going to be seeking, your nervous system will be seeking to maintain that, even if it's not really what you want or desire. You can't willpower your way through that.
Right. So their nervous system is wired to avoid. And so this, tangibly speaking, manifests itself, like we mentioned, with a tendency to overwork. Right. And I mean, let's just even take working 8 hours a day. We've normalized that in Western society, and it's actually proven to be very ineffective.
I wonder who came up with that, because even when I worked in corporate, there's no fucking way I was productive 8 hours a day.
No.
I work like 2 hours and I'm like, I'm done. Like, I'm out.
It's been proven that people who work 6 hours a day get just as much done and are just as, if not more productive than people who work 8 hours a day.
Even that feels long to me.
So we've normalized an incredibly high level of work, which means we ultimately end up sacrificing somewhere else in our lives, because if we're saying yes to an 8-hour workday, we're inevitably saying no to other things.
Sure.
And so when you factor in like taking care of yourself, being in relationship or partnership, like taking care of the kids, for example, a lot of our clients, I know this is a similarity that they don't have a lot of hobbies.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
I still struggle with that sometimes, because you told me that eating out at restaurants is not.
It's not a hobby. And
I think listening to music is.
It is if you like go to concerts and you.
Who are you to define my hobby?
Collect records, because everybody listens to music. You can listen to music in the car on the way to the gym.
Spotify said I'm in the top 72% of listeners based on 20,000 minutes last year.
That's because you put it on while you were working.
All right, fine.
You never like sit down in your office, like in your comfy chair, and just like veg out and listen to music. You never do that.
Okay, fair point.
Right. It's not a hobby. It's something that you do in conjunction with other normalized behaviors like work, for example. So again, back to how this manifests, it's constantly filling up your schedule with work-related things or with other things that require you to be productive, quote unquote.
Sure.
Right. Again, working out, exercise. I'm not obviously health and fitness, diet and exercise are important things, but that's not the question. The question is like, what's ultimately driving that behavior? What's the unconscious motivation beneath it? How many of your clients, like, they wake up, they do a morning routine, they go and they work out, and then they immediately go into work, right? So they're constantly going and doing. And so there's this unconscious embrace of busyness that in most cases that I've found with my clients, and I know you found with yours, is this adaptation or overcompensation to avoid being with or dealing with pain.
Let's talk about how this looks in our relationship and in our life. Mm-hmm. How do you think that if you were to describe to other people practices and like what goes on behind closed doors and the way that we embody this work, what would you say?
Well, meditation for me is a non-negotiable because it forces you to be present. It forces you to be still. It forces you to be with your thoughts, because the intention of meditation, is not to stop your thoughts or control your thoughts. It's to be non-reactive to them and practice equanimity, non-reactivity with regard to your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so you are shifting from a sympathetic state, fight or flight, into a parasympathetic state because you're being non-reactive to your thoughts, and therefore you're practicing mindfulness, non-reactivity, which is going to build internal resilience when it comes to dealing with stressors.
You know what's cool is that mindfulness and meditation is not just simply I'm aware. It's I'm aware that I'm aware.
Totally.
Sitting in the seat of observation, which has this really beautiful piece to it because you are suddenly not attached and you are not, again, Velcroed to the thoughts that are rising and falling. You just notice them.
Right, because in every other area of our life, we're seeking to achieve a particular outcome, whether it's in work or with our health and fitness. Right? We're very, very goal-oriented, especially as entrepreneurs or as coaches who serve entrepreneurs. Right? There is no goal per se other than to simply be and be present and practice presence. And like I mentioned, that has a host of benefits that ends up trickling over into other areas of your life that allows you to better navigate daily stressors at work at home with your partner, with the kids, all of your daily responsibilities. So for me, that's non-negotiable. Journaling is something that I'm finding that's more and more beneficial.
Yeah, we came back to that in the new year, which has been really nice. We were like, I think I shared this on one of the recent podcast episodes, which was like the questions that you had 2 questions that you had me write down, and then I had a bunch that I was journaling around. And the 2 of us are sitting there on New Year's Day just like, I didn't expect this to be. Like, we were just sitting there crying.
Yeah, well.
But it was so good. It was so healing. It was so great.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you allow yourself to do stream of consciousness journaling, it absolutely
What does that
reveals,
mean if you were to describe that?
Well, again, you're not trying to tailor your response in any particular fashion. You are literally just journaling as things come
getting it all out.
Come to mind. Right.
Yeah.
So the goal is not to think about what you're going to write. It's just to write and allow whatever is going to come out.
Yeah.
And what typically ends up coming out is the unconscious motivation beneath the conscious desire or behavior.
Yeah.
And that's when you're truly forced to sit with, be with, and ultimately reconcile with the shadow intention beneath all of these behaviors that we so easily rationalize and justify as being hardworking, being driven, being assertive. And unfortunately, it just has us as a society and in general completely addicted to stress. I think last year over 330 million prescriptions were written for anti-anxiety medication. Think about that.
So sad.
There's just over, I think, 350, somewhere between 350 and 400 million people in the United States.
Wow.
So you think about how many people are struggling with this. And of course, social media, technology, cell phones are only fueling this addiction that is ultimately causing us to be dysregulated. And when we're dysregulated and we don't know it because it's become so normalized, we need coping mechanisms, aka we need avoidance strategies in order to self-soothe and to manage that stress and anxiety. And again, it's very easy to look at coping mechanisms like pornography and drinking and drugs as harmful coping mechanisms or avoidance strategies. But there are a host of other avoidance strategies, like we mentioned earlier, working out, caring or caretaking for others, that are these more noble coping mechanisms that ultimately consume and dominate our focus, but in a way that allows us to avoid being with this stress, this anxiety, right? And so it never actually goes away, right? And this is where you and I ultimately find our clients really struggling to unplug when they go on vacation, right?
Or not taking a vacation at all.
Not taking a vacation at all. Disconnecting, being able to disconnect from their phones, invest in hobbies. I have so many clients, when I ask them what their hobbies are, they literally struggle to figure out what their hobbies are outside of work. Work's not a hobby, right? A hobby is something that no one has to push you to do. And there's really no monetary reward other than doing it for the sheer enjoyment of it. They struggle to take their foot off the gas. They constantly feel pressure or under pressure to keep up the pace, right? So it's this very internalized feeling of, I gotta go.
Sure. Well, in many ways, I will say that has helped them.
Of course
it
has.
And so I call this the anxious achiever archetype. And this is the part of you that comes online to drive those behaviors so that you can achieve and get that dopamine hit. Because the fear is, well, if I'm not under pressure and I don't have all this stress, then how am I going to perform, or will I at all? And so I get the fear around, like, why would I want to break up with the very thing that's had me achieve all of this success? But my question is to those people, yeah, but are you really happy? Because and I don't think you have to choose, to be clear, between success and happiness. And I think that success is happiness, but redefining where you're sourcing that energy and that motivation from is really where we come in and somatically help clients, right? Because the level of, here's the thing, I'll have people that are like, well, I don't think I'm stressed, but I just clench my jaw at night, or I don't sleep ever, and I don't take time off, or after this next project, then I'll take a break. I'm not stressed, but I just have to get this done right now. Right. And so that is normalized chronic stress. Correct. And unfortunately, it's become socially acceptable. And as you're calling it, like manifested as like these noble coping strategies.
Right. Well, and when you normalize stress, it's important to put into context what that really means. Yeah. Which is that you are unaware that you're stressed. Yeah. You are stressed, but you are unaware of it. And so your normal routine is not going to reveal the fact that you're stressed, because your normal routine, you have designed it specifically, unconsciously, to avoid stress. Sure. So you like,
isn't that ironic?
Right. So by doing your normal routine, right, it's not going to reveal that you're stressed. Yeah. What's going to reveal it is when all of a sudden you go on vacation, or you start to embrace meditation as a consistent daily habit. You disconnect from your phone for 24 hours, right? Those are the things that are ultimately going to reveal that you've been operating in a chronic state of stress, because anxiety is inherently going to go up. Not because sitting still creates anxiety. All it does is reveal the anxiety that's beneath the surface. That's what's actually going on. And for entrepreneurs specifically, and I say this because the majority of our audience, especially our clients, are entrepreneurs, I think
I just want to also interject. I also serve executives, so I don't want people to feel like I'm ruling them out. Sure. Really women in leadership, but yeah.
But even so, they emulate a lot of the same personal characteristics and personality traits as entrepreneurs. But for entrepreneurs, I think it's 78% of them have some type of mental health disorder. Wow. Compared to, or is it 70? I think it's 72% compared to 48% of the general population. Wow. It is significantly higher. And so when you really start to analyze why that is, in many, many instances, it's because the lifestyle of an entrepreneur, right? Because no one's telling you to go home. No one's telling you to stop working.
We live where we work. Right. Like we share this office many times.
No one's telling you to go on vacation. No one's telling you to take the weekend off. Right. Entrepreneurship, by virtue, is a beautiful, beautiful way for them to engage in avoidant behavior that allows them to not deal with or confront what is beneath their anxiety. Right? So you call it your, anxious achiever archetype. I would actually suggest that it's anxious avoidant archetype, because you have someone who is dealing with anxiety.
Well, they don't consciously know they're avoiding. That's why we don't call it that.
Correct.
I got to meet them where they're at. Right. Achieving is the goal.
Correct.
And that's where they come to me, which is that you don't have to burn everything down.
Achievement as a means to avoid.
Sure.
So
that's in parentheses, italics, and gray.
They experience chronic anxiety or stress as a result of unresolved pain or emotional trauma that then causes them to avoid. And how do they avoid? By working.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me because, we have kids, although it's my kids, you co-parent. He's a bonus dad. He's 100% a dad. And Peyton and Ty, they're in 3rd and 1st grade. And it's so crazy to see how young the tracks are laid down because of the adults in charge of the school system. Like, how fucked up is this? They have a working snack for my son and daughter in 3rd and 1st grade. You can't take 10 minutes to sit and consciously eat. Parents, please pack a snack that's not messy, because we just need to get all this stuff in and we don't have time. I'm like, we have a working snack. I mean, one of the red flags I remember specifically looking for when I was back and forth with corporate jobs was take a look around at people's desks and see if they eat at them, because then you'll know real fast what kind of culture it is, which is we have no time to eat. And like you come last, it's just work 8 hours a day and be handcuffed to your desk. And now we have those tracks being laid down in the school system. And it infuriates me. It infuriates me. Recently, this was like maybe a couple months ago, they wanted to close school. You probably remember this. They wanted to close school. They gave a heads up. We might be closing school tomorrow due to weather. Not sure the school's going to have power. And I'm like, well, first of all, we live less than 2 miles from the school. So if you don't have power, what makes you think we will? And number two, just because we have access to Wi-Fi, you should not expect parents to then have to react and have to then play teacher and figure out how to homeschool them because the school decided to close school and now we're supposed to figure it out. But also, what happened to fucking like the idea of snow days where you could actually be off? What happened to sick days and vacation days where we could actually be unplugged? I mean, it's just crazy to me because we are so accessible that we are expected to always be accessible. And that creates this like, oh gosh, I can't unplug because you're always needed somewhere. There's always something to plug into. And I think that just feeds a lot of this chronic stress as well.
Yeah, well, you see people who are constantly overcommitted to things where they constantly have a full calendar or they're tempted to fill their calendar at the very least, even if it doesn't actually result in that. And it just separates people from themselves because that's what they're ultimately doing is they're running from themselves, right? They're running from what is, how they are actually feeling and what is actually causing them to feel that way. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, we really celebrate this because of course, for a lot of entrepreneurs, they have created an incredible amount of success as a result of this avoidant behavior. And which means, of course, why would I change anything? Right. But when you actually start to sit with them and you get a peek behind the scenes, so many of them are, again, yes, stressed out, but they're unhappy. They're unfulfilled.
Their body's inflamed. They're overweight. They're struggling with sleep. I mean, basic needs, honestly.
Right. They don't have any habits that they do simply for the sheer enjoyment of doing them. They constantly feel stress and pressure, again, to keep up the pace and to cover expenses and, et cetera, and I think it was Tony Robbins who once said that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. But, it kind of has to get so bad to the point to where you can't ignore the elephant in the room anymore. And unfortunately, that's when you and I end up serving, a lot of people. Yeah. In our businesses is where they've created significant success. And by success, I mean monetary success, financial success, et cetera, status. And they are fundamentally unhappy and unfulfilled. Yep. Especially when it comes to their own mental health and how they consistently feel in their physical bodies. Yep.
Yeah. So wild. Anything else you want to add to what you think that how we embody the work behind closed doors or any other things there? Or did that feel complete to you?
Well,
you said journaling, meditation.
I'll just share for myself. Playing golf is something that I have been investing more and more time and energy and effort into because it literally forces you to slow down. Mm-hmm. It forces me to be outside, and being outside supports in shifting from a sympathetic state, fight or flight, into a parasympathetic state, rest and relaxation. Nature does that inherently pretty much, as does looking out at the horizon, taking a walk, slowing your nervous system down. And so for me, that's been really helpful, really beautiful. I really love playing the sport, so that helps. But that cooking is something that I love as well because it's an opportunity for me to be creative. So I'm utilizing a completely different portion of my brain, and I'm able to tap into my creativity in a way that doesn't involve being stressed, because typically when you're in a creative state, you're going much slower and you're being much more methodical, as opposed to reactive. Mm-hmm. So that's been really helpful for me. And it's something that I pretty much do every weekend, which you know.
Mm-hmm. So, I get to reap the benefits. Yeah. My hobby is eating what you cook.
Right. So, those are things for me is making a significant investment in my hobbies.
Yeah.
Which force me to take time off.
Yeah.
Disconnect from work, disconnect from my daily responsibilities at work. Having really slow mornings, it has been huge. Just reading, enjoying my cup of coffee without this temptation to need to go straight into work after my morning routine. Mm-hmm. So just inviting in a lot more flow.
Yeah.
Which has felt incredibly good and has been very key to kind of retraining my nervous system to embrace slowing down.
Yeah.
So environment plays a huge part.
For me, I allow myself to sleep in fairly often. I require a lot of sleep. And so my body clock feels good waking up around 7:30 to 8:30. And I have a lot of spaciousness in my day. I do not schedule back-to-back calls anymore. I have my days compartmentalized so that I can be in one single energy on each of those days. Fridays, like today, is a kind of a swing day where I can record or do content or not. We can travel or just take time off, have a personal day. But I love spaciousness in my schedule.
It's great.
Yeah. All right. What is your first class move this week?
First class move?
Yeah, what first class move are you making this week?
Well, it's Friday.
Well, going into the next week.
I think I'm going to go play golf on Monday.
Cool.
So, when most people are like getting ready to buckle down and go back to the grind, I'm probably going to hit the golf course because I think it's going to be the only really sunny day next week. Mm-hmm. And so just, again, embracing, retraining my nervous system to rest and relaxation.
Yeah.
And a state of homeostasis and comfortability.
Yeah. Did you know that I was invited to go roller skating?
I did not.
Not this weekend, but you can actually rent out the entire roller rink here. Mm-hmm. One of them, Amber goes all the time, our friend Amber Shaw.
Sure.
For $600, you can rent out the whole roller rink.
That's wild.
You can pick your own playlist, and for 2 hours, it's just yours. That's you awesome. And up to 50 people.
Love it.
I'm like, we should totally plan a party.
Oh, man, that'd be fun.
Okay, very important question as we round out. We're going to play a game of this or that.
Okay.
So we're going to ask each other questions, and you have to think fast and just quickly pick.
Okay, great.
Okay. Bananas or blueberries?
Blueberries.
What? Really?
Yep.
Okay. Mountains or beach?
Mountains.
Snow or ocean? What?
One environment, one form of weather.
I told you we're talking. Weather was on my mind.
How about winter, summer?
I'm asking the questions right now, okay?
Lord. Okay,
you
go.
can ask me whatever you want. I asked snow or beach.
Beach.
One is experienced, one is inside, one is out. Anyway.
Doesn't make sense. All right, keep going.
Okay, sushi or pizza?
Sushi.
Okay, something other than weather or food. Puppies or cats?
Puppies for sure.
Yeah, cats are assholes. The amount of Instagram videos we send each other with cats.
No thanks.
There was one where this baby was remember the one yesterday? Crawling over the cat, and the cat just kicks it and the baby falls over.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So funny. It looked like Lauren's cat. Being on podcasts or recording on your own?
I don't really record on my own, so...
You don't record any content on your own? You've done some videos.
I write more than anything. I'll say be on podcasts.
Okay. I don't know. I'm bad at this game. Your turn.
Okay, I'll steal one from your book, even though I know the answer to it. Beach or mountains?
Beach. It's hard to think of ones. It's like food or places.
Beer or wine?
Wine. Something good. Come on, babe.
Running or going to the gym?
Going to the gym, 1,000%. Fuck running.
All right, that's all
do
I
you want
got.
shin splints in an hour? Like, my body is not made for running.
Mine is.
Unless I'm running from a bear or something. That I can do.
That's all I got.
All right. That's fine. All right. I love you. Thanks for being on.
Love you too.
Okay. Bye, guys. See you next week.
Bye, guys.
I hope you enjoyed your flight, and I'll see you on board again soon. Seriously, though, thanks for listening. If you're ready to take this work deeper and upgrade your mind, I want to invite you to join us inside my Millionaire Mindset program. This is where you'll start using my guided meditations to help you overcome anxiety and experience even more abundance. When you join, you'll have access to my entire audio library. Head over to elevatewithkeri.com and we'll see you inside.